everyone, it's Mrs. Kushner, and today I'm going to show you how you can start working with logos in Adobe Spark Post. So first you're going to go ahead and log into the app. You'll start on this icon on the left is Spark Post, and then you're going to go ahead and click on the very bottom where it says log in, and then you'll follow the prompts to log in with your email. You'll have to do it a couple times. Click on that. And you're going to go to the plus sign, and we're going to pick solid color. And for this exercise, I only want you to pick 2 colors. So I might start with a black background and then use white text, and then just use black and white, but you can pick 2 other colors. It's up to you. So I'll stick with my black background, and then I will click next. And for this, we're going to start with a square. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Instagram for my size. That looks good. And what I want you to notice right now, I have 2 colors on the screen, right? I have this double tap to edit, which is brown, and then I've got my black background. But what's happening is that the letters are cut out of the rectangle, and we call those negative shapes because even though they make letters we recognize, they're cut out. So we're kind of playing with this idea. So what I want you to do is just start with the first letter of your name, and for me that's S. So most logos start simply just with something like this. So let's say I want to use my initials, which are SK, and I start with the S that looks like this. We talked about editing a color, so that's my background. If I click on the actual letter, I can go to color here and I can change it. So if I want it to be black and white, that's what we had talked about before, but you can make it whatever you want. There's lots of combinations here. And I can swap it like that. So now I've got what I was talking about before, that negative space. Now I want to figure out how can I go ahead and put the letter K in there. So if I go to add and I add text, I can go ahead and add the K for my last name. And it's coming up kind of like the S. So I've seen logos before where you just play with 1 large letter and 1 small letter. So you might want to play with size. Thinking about what happens if they go corner to corner or side to side. I could actually invert this right now. So I could swap the colors like that. And you notice how like the edge of the K, if I click on that, kind of lines up. So I might want to play a little bit with that. What happens if I line up that K and I click off of it? It almost looks like there's a little piece missing now from that rectangle, even though I added it, right? So thinking about what happens if I move it around. Okay, so what you're going to be doing here is just really playing. What happens if I make this larger? What happens if I make it smaller? What happens if I put it inside of the S? You know, does that change the way it looks? But what I want you to actually do is just using your first and last initial, create some different logos. Maybe you want to change the font. So what happens if I change the font? Does that change the look? Does it make it more interesting? And I scroll all the way on the bottom to the right side. I've got a plus sign over here. If I click on that plus sign, I can actually go to add fonts, and now I can pick any font that I want. So if you want to get it a little bit more complex, I might pick a font like that and download it. And there's a bunch of options here. So, you know, you could spend a long time really going through, finding a font that you think represents you, because if you're thinking about what's the brand here, you're trying to represent yourself. These are your initials. So you can click as many as you want, and then that way you've got more to play with. So if I click on here and I press the cloud with the down arrow, that's going to download it. And then I can go back to the top left and click all fonts, and then I click close, and now I've got a big list here of ones that I've added, some from today, some from before. So if I go ahead and click, for instance, this Bureau Grow, I can click on that, and you see there's even other ones, and now you see that it's added that below and it's changed that font. So those are some things that you can do to add to your fonts. Again, you go to the side and click your plus. And in order to make it show up, now that I've downloaded it, I can go ahead and click on it once, and then it'll change. So you can see how just by changing those fonts, that has completely changed what I've got over here. And now it's a little bit more interesting if I bring them together. you'll see this S almost doesn't even look like an S anymore. So you might play with abstracting like that. So that's totally different, right? Some other things that you can do, if I click on these letters, I think that we talked about how you can play with the shape. So maybe I want it to be round, so that completely changes it based on the shape that I have for the background. And you see that's like a double color, right? So I can go back to my color and kind of, now that I've changed this, and I changed my size, like some of these have more options than others, right? So what I might want to do in this case, and you see this is where you can change a custom. And the other thing that I might do is make my background white and change the color of my letter so that my letter color is black, and now you can see a little bit better. So now if I go back and change some of those shapes, just to show you, that's the K, I'm going to click on the S. You see how it changes. I can add lines like that. I've got like these borders. So there's all kinds of choices that you can make that will completely change the look of this. And you see that some of these have a dark background and the letters are see-through, or some of them, like this one for instance. So if I go to my color and I swap it, you'll see how that looks. Okay, so those are ones where it's already creating that negative shape for you. And now for my K, I have to go back and change that because it looks silly to have two borders, right? So that's where you can play with this a lot more. I can go back and get rid of an effect, and then I can change my color to black, right? So those are the kinds of things that you can do to experiment here. As long as you're clicking on the letter, again, I'm playing with the font, the color, and the shape, the effects, and you can kind of go from there. So you're going to create 5 of these. Click on that, and I can go to edit, and let's say I messed up and I want to start again, I could delete it. So if I click on here, I could press edit again, and I could say duplicate, and now I have 2. And I can click on that and change it to S. And now I can just play with these 2 letters. What happens if they intersect? What happens if one is big and one is small? How does it change the way they look when they intersect if they're the same color? So you can play with one that's vertical. Maybe I want one that's horizontal, meaning it goes side to side. Playing with size, so you can create contrast that one is big and one is small. Maybe you play with what happens if they start to fit together. Maybe they make an interesting shape when they fit together. You can play with turning it. So those are all options that you have as you go. And you can also play with contrast in terms of the font, right? So maybe if my letters have different fonts, it will be a little more interesting. So, you know, what happens if I have 2 different fonts? So those are the kinds of things that you can play with.